Hi, everybody. My name is Lorena Escarcha. Thank you all so much for joining with us. It is an honor to be joined by all of these incredible panelists today.
Yes, thank you again for joining us at this panel. I'm really happy to be able to moderate this with Lorena Escarcha. And we will begin by introducing some of our panelists, starting off with Kim Ross.
Hey everybody, I'm Kim Ross, and I'm the executive director and founder of Rethink Energy Florida. And we're a Tallahassee-based organization, but we're statewide in our presence. And we are all about getting folks to turn away from fossil fuels and onto renewable energy. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much. And now we'll introduce Emma Roherig.
Hi guys, my name is Emma Roherig. I am the current Sustainability and Innovation Coordinator for UCF Student Government, and I am from Punta Gorda, Florida.
Thank you. And now we will introduce Vasakin Mahesan.
Hi everyone, I'm Vaskin. I'm a rising high school senior from Boca Raton, Florida. Thank you all for coming. I look forward to sharing ideas.
Thank you. And now we'll introduce Anna Eskamani. Thank you for being here.
Of course. Hi, everyone. Representative Anna V. Eskamani. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and proud to serve District 47 in the Florida Legislature. I am from Orlando, and I'm zooming in from Orlando as well.
Thank you so much, guys. We're very excited to have you, and we'll have Lauren start off with some of our questions.
So for the first question we have today, why is renewable energy so important to consider when considering the public's health?
And we'll ask Kim first.
Okay, great. So, yeah, I think it goes back to climate change. And when you talk about climate change, you're talking about health risks that are associated with climate change. So, be it pollution from fossil fuel burning power plants, so like coal has pollution out there, be it fracking and the wastewater contamination and all the studies that have been done that show that health is associated with fracking and that produces what they call natural gas, which most of us in organizations like mine call it fracked gas. And, be it drilling for oil and all the health risks that are associated with that. So whenever we burn fossil fuels, we are both producing pollution, but we're also exacerbating climate change. And climate change invariably has health risks. Up in Tallahassee, we say, it's not just about our winters being milder. It's actually, you've got more vector-borne disease insects, right? That are gonna provide diseases. So you've got sea level rise and how that impacts folks. So it on and on and on. I'm sure other folks will fill in the gaps where I miss. But climate change has massive impacts to public health. So coronavirus is not directly related to climate change, but we will have pandemics that are directly related to climate change as we get further down that rabbit hole of not fixing climate change before it gets worse.
Thank you so much. What do you think, Emma, about its relation?
I mean, adding on to what Kim said, everything she was spot on. In regard to climate change, renewable energy, like we're seeing it right now in Orlando community, the Paramore community is literally boxed in by highways. There's pollution blowing over from I-4 right into the citizens' lungs. It's causing children to develop severe asthma, as well as other chronic health conditions, even cancer. And then in the long term, like we'll see it as our heat patterns change globally, like different foods will not be able to grow the way they are anymore in certain temperatures, and our entire food supply is going to change. In some ways, some produce will be able to grow more, but most of the produce we do consume will not be able to grow at all. So it will severely impact our diets and our nutrition as well.
Thank you. And Vasakin, how do you think renewable energy can be used to resolve this public health crisis we're seeing?
Right. So when energy companies pollute our atmosphere through means such as oil, gas, coal, they're not taking into account our health. They're only focused on their own bottom lines. So I think renewable energy, because we all need energy, and the best way to go forward would be to invest in renewable energy. And to encourage that investment, a Citizens Climate Lobby main policy is a carbon fee and dividend policy, in which companies would have to pay $15 per metric ton of carbon dioxide they emit, plus $10 every year when our policy is enacted. And that money is distributed to the American people. So they're kind of getting paid back for the damage that's being done. And that will also increase the price of fossil fuels, which will, by our free market ideas, encourage investment into renewable energy.
Thank you so much. And how about you, Anna?
I think most folks have provided a really great summary of why it matters. My brain goes directly to clean air, clean water, which so many communities live without, especially our Black, Indigenous, and people of color across this country. And I think Emma used Paramore as a great example here in Central Florida. But we also see this notion of, landfills being built in low-income communities, and pipelines, being built through where, so many communities that have means will say, not in my backyard. Then the assumption is that for communities that don't have efficacy, that these major corporations can just plow right through their homes. And, the externalities of, if you will, of the fossil industry, and is also going to cause not only damages to air and water, leading to asthma and other difficult health environments, but it also just damages the quality of life in different ways as well.
Thank you so much. And honestly, I agree with a lot of what you guys have been saying. It's really important to implement renewable energy so that we make sure that our public's health is a priority. But obviously, something that interferes with this is disagreement about it. So what are some reasons you guys think people hear about the integration of renewable energy and disagree with it?
I'm happy to go first. Just in the legislature, and I know for my colleagues that do advocacy work in Tallahassee, you hear this too. First there's like this constant pivot towards China, and I guess China's like a constant pivot for many conservatives, but it's frustrating because they'll say, well, anything we do, it won't matter because you have other countries that are polluting. And it's just this complete disregard of responsibility and of leadership because of the decisions of other countries, which I cannot control what other countries do. I can't even control other states do, but I can set an example of leadership in Florida, and our economy will benefit from moving away from fossil fuels. I mean, it's yes, there is this deeper goal of addressing climate change that we all hold deeply, but there also are the financial motivations to move away from fossil fuels, which is often what I have to lean on when talking to my conservative colleagues, is to inspire them to realize that energy efficiency is a job creator. Energy efficiency saves money, while it also saves the earth. And so there's so many benefits moving that direction. But, folks, I think, get caught up in some of the political rhetoric that's used as, make the topic harder to understand. And, I'm inspired by all the young people around this issue, but I think that those that wish to continue to ignore climate change see the young voices and don't take them seriously, right? So, and again, that's why it's so important that young voices don't stop, that we, everyone is persistent in this effort. And especially right now, as we're tackling multiple crises at once, right? We have a health crisis, an economic crisis, and of course, there's a crisis around racism in our country. And the uprising of Black Lives Matter, which is so powerful and so important. I've heard speakers at protests talk about environmental justice, and that cannot be a narrative that fossil fuels take away from us. And unfortunately, there was an article yesterday of Chevron getting caught being a part of a PR firm that was trying to pitch an anti-climate change article being branded as being anti-Black, that if you pursue renewable energy, you're being anti-Black. And it's part of this decades-long campaign of fossil fuel companies to spread misinformation and to continue to keep communities tied to them versus exploring alternative energy resources. So we have to, so many shapes and forms, and just focus on the facts and focus on what's at stake.
Thank you so much. That clarifies the picture very well. Thank you. And so I have a question for Vasakin. What do you think in regards to helping people understand the misconceptions of renewable energy? How do you think we can clarify this, especially with the use of carbon taxes?
Thank you. So I think one of the main misconceptions about renewable energy is that it's too expensive, which when you look at it on paper, it does look more expensive, but the cost of fossil fuels, however cheap it may be, does not take into account the damage it has on health. When we pollute, we're hurting our lungs, our environment, and we trigger a rise in sea levels due to warming climates that result in the destruction of billions of dollars in coastline. Already in Miami and Miami Beach, we're seeing preparations for rising sea levels, which threaten our economy and our infrastructure. And I don't think that should be a partisan issue. I think strong infrastructure and strong economy is a bipartisan issue. So at Citizens Climate Lobby, like I was saying earlier, we support a carbon tax. And in fact, because we've seen a bill come to the floor of Congress called HR 763, Energy Innovation and Carbon Dividend Act last year. And what this act proposes is a $15 per metric ton of carbon, plus a $10 each year added. So the first year it's implemented, it'll be $15 a ton. Next year, $25 a ton, $35, and so on. This money will be taken and distributed evenly to American families, regardless of where you live or how much you make. So this will be subsidizing American families for a rise in fuel costs. And since Americans will be getting a check every month, that would cancel out the rise in fuel costs. However, the beauty of this plan is that if Americans start switching over to cleaner energy, they would be making money from the dividend checks they would be receiving. So that eventually will cause a demand for for fossil fuels to fall as they become more and more expensive. And studies have shown that a carbon tax could lead to a 52% reduction in fossil fuel levels, and it could add over 2.8 million jobs. As Anna was saying earlier, clean energy is very innovative, and it could lead to dozens of new tech jobs, putting America at the forefront of energy innovation. And also jobs created by clean energy, such as solar panel engineering or windmill engineering, are good jobs, and they don't come with the same repercussions that coal jobs come with, which have been shown to lead to cancer. And in fact, the carbon tax policy has been endorsed by every single federal chair alive. It's been endorsed by 27 Nobel laureates, including William Nordhaus, who actually won a Nobel Prize for carbon pricing. It's been endorsed by Bill Nye the Science Guy, our favorite, and even one of Ronald Reagan's, who's a conservative, one of his old economic advisors, Arthur Laffer, has come out in support of carbon taxes, as has dozens of professors, both in economics and environmental studies, from dozens of top colleges around the country. If you want to learn more, you can visit our website, Citizens Climate Lobby. Thank you.
Thank you so much for clarifying that misconception through carbon taxes. That was beautifully put. We really appreciate that. And so, Kim, what's your take on these misconceptions that some of our public faces with regards to renewable energy?
Sure. So like Representative Eskamani was saying, we do a lot of advocacy in the Capitol here in Tallahassee, and we definitely get folks pointing to China. Well, we can't really do anything because it's a worldwide problem. I also work a lot at the local level. So we're working in the city of Tallahassee, but also in Brevard County to work with our local governments to have them shift to 100% renewable energy. Sometimes that's a little easier lift, but some of the misconceptions that we have there, people are concerned about the costs. They're concerned about reliability, especially the city staff that I work with, they say, well, there's some requirements around reliability. And those are things that need to be worked through. The cost piece, like Vasakin was saying, that cost, if you look at the big picture of fossil fuels and what they actually cost in terms of health, in terms of the subsidies that the government gives them, if you look at the big picture on costs, then yeah, the cost is low, but the cost is also low even if you don't take that into account. Right now, it is less expensive for a local utility, a utility scale to build solar than it is for them to build a new power plant. And so here in the city of Tallahassee, they're doing a really great job. They've actually hired a contractor or are hiring a contractor to come up with a clean energy plan so that they can move the city of Tallahassee all the way to 100% renewable energy. And our coalition that worked on the language with them, made sure that we included information around making sure it's a just transition, so that it's not something that only the wealthy folks can afford to put on their homes and that sort of thing, and making sure that the costs are equitably distributed so that our lower income and more vulnerable communities don't have to pay those costs. There's lots of solutions if you're looking for them. I think one of the problems is that not everybody's looking for the solutions, and that would be bottom line. What I would say, got to start looking for the solutions in order to find them. There's technological solutions, there's economical solutions to any problem that gets thrown our way, and there's a lot of good arguments out there, but mostly the number one thing is people have to start looking for those solutions in order to see them.
Thank you so much. And Emma, how do you think some misconceptions have been encountered maybe within UCF campus, and how have you tried to fix those misconceptions that occur?
Yeah, great question. So throughout my experience, even before I was in this position, I was part of the Student Sustainability Advisory Committee, and oftentimes the university they weren't willing to fund renewable energy projects because, as everyone else has touched on, like it's in short term, it doesn't pay off immediately, and especially like at public university level, the solar panels cost way more than it would on like a regular residential home, because they have to pay mounting fees, so this way they don't like fly off during a hurricane. And it's just especially in this time period right now, like UCF is just looking at what they're going to make immediate profit off of. And there are universities out there, they have student green energy funds. They have raised $1 of tuition to go towards this fund so they can install renewable energy projects. And at UCF, this has been tried like at least 3 times that I'm aware of, and it has continuously been denied because they're just not willing to put the money towards it. And I feel like that is usually like the biggest misconception, is that renewable energy is expensive. And in the long run, if the UCF were to adopt this, they would eventually save money on from the renewable energy. But instead, I had just found this out not too long ago, but UCF actually has a natural gas plant on campus that they are profiting off of. So of course they're going to want to keep that going, and they're not going to want to invest in renewable energy because they want the profit where they already have it. And that's part of just the general like carbon lock-in of the entire economy, is that so many universities, corporations, everything has invested in fossil fuels for such a long time. They put so much money building in these systems that they don't want to take the money out and put it into something else, because it's like starting all over. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So I know we touched on this before, how climate change impacts certain people specifically, such as people of color and certain areas. So specifically, Mustafa Ali Santiago, the Vice President of the National Wildlife Foundation, explained that the impacts of climate change disproportionately affect low-income communities along with people of color. Specifically, things like pipeline infrastructures harming vulnerable communities or Native Indigenous areas are specifically targeted and facing the brutal side of climate change. So how would you guys address these issues with, renewable energy in mind as a solution to protect these vulnerable communities? Anna, would you like to start us?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So my first thought also goes to the impact of our recent hurricanes here in Florida. So Hurricane Michael on the Panhandle, Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico, Hurricane Dorian in the Bahamas. Each one of these major weather disasters impacted every Floridian in different ways, but most predominantly low-income Floridians and people of color, our Black Indigenous folks, our Caribbean neighbors. I mean, these parts of the world are still recovering from this disaster. I mean, the Panhandle is not even fully built yet, and we're back in hurricane season. Even my district, as a very micro example, we had a tornado here about 2 weeks ago, and the tornado actually came through the south side of our district up to where I am in Thornton Park. And when you drive through our district, we have a very diverse community, and you could see the more the homes of more means compared to those that are more working class. And, for those of means, if they experience a storm, they're probably going to make it, right? There's going to be some property damage. There's likely insurance. There's ways to recover compared to our working class folks, many who are renters. And we had 50 displaced families just here in our district because of one tornado. So we know that there is a connection between extreme weather patterns and climate change. And so if we don't address it, we're going to see more low income, more Black, Indigenous, and people of color impacted by these natural disasters. And as we mentioned already earlier, we also see our communities of concentrated disadvantage face more environmental hazards. And not just in the home, by the way, also in the workplace. So farm workers, right? So farm workers who tend to be communities of color are working in harsh conditions, often with no water or bathroom breaks, and are working with chemicals. And so, this environment alone is dangerous for them. You go to our custodians. Custodians are working with dangerous chemicals all the time to clean our hospitals and clean our hotels and what have you. And so it's the environments people live and work in tied to the greater ecosystem that we each contribute to. And moving away from fossil fuels and towards renewable energy, it not only helps us curb the impact of climate change, but it also creates cleaner jobs that many families can benefit from. And it saves many of these families money, because by participating in energy efficiency programs, which utility companies are supposed to create to be available to working families, then they're going to also reduce their carbon footprint while also reducing their monthly payments. And so it is such a win-win for us to pursue renewable energy and energy efficiency programs in the state of Florida and across the country.
Thank you so much. That was really eye-opening. And I never really took into consider how specific jobs impact people directly. That was very interesting. Thank you. Kim, how would you address this problem with climate change directing towards these vulnerable communities, or solutions relating to renewable energy?
So I'll come at it from a slightly different angle, in that I think when you want to talk about environmental justice and when you want to come up with solutions to that, and I definitely think that renewable energy is a part of that solution, right? A big part. But when you want to talk about that, I think it's important to have the right people at the table. We talk about the Jimenez principles of environmental justice. If someone's watching this and you don't know what those are, write that down, because that's important. But part of that is bringing people from those vulnerable communities to the table to have the conversation and to be part of this leading the solution, right? And so I really think that, that's so important. And I'll give you an example that I'm aware of from Miami-Dade. In Miami-Dade, when I believe it was Hurricane Irma came through, the FEMA went out and they found hotels for people to move into who were displaced, right? In order to get into the hotel, you had to have a credit card or you had to have $200 cash up front. And so people who are disadvantaged don't necessarily have credit cards and they don't necessarily have $200 to spare. So that's one thing, that if they had brought the right people to the table, they probably could have come up with solutions that were creative. And instead, some of the leaders of environmental justice communities down there were saying, well, you know what, that's like, we had to stay in our flooded homes, in our homes that were mildewing, and because we didn't have a place to go because they didn't have the right people at the table. And then the other thing I would just mention real quick is there's a great thing that maps environmental justice, and it's actually done by the EPA, and it's called, if you just do environmental justice and maps, but you'll probably find it, it's ejscreen.epa.gov/mapper, and that'll kind of show you in your area what, where are the environmental justice concerns, and how do people of color or people who are economically disadvantaged, how do those issues overlay with environmental issues in your community?
Can I just add to that quickly?
Go for it.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the patterns that climate research has shown us is that most of the polluting comes from wealthier areas, but the people who suffer the most from climate change are communities of color that tend to be less economically fortunate. So one of the things I liked about the carbon tax and dividend plan is that the money that goes back will make sure that these low-income families don't fall behind, and that we can address climate change without having to worry about low-income families suffering.
Thank you so much for both of your guys' input. That was incredibly, these are two, the carbon tax and the right people at the table are two crucial factors in order to make this needed change happen. Emma, what is your input on the vulnerable communities and solutions needed?
I touched upon this a little bit earlier, and I was also going to mention the Jimenez principles that Kim brought up, and Representative Eskamani definitely touched on it. In Orlando, I mean, I said it earlier, the Paramore community, it's boxed in by highways, and this is not the only community in the United States, for most definitely, and it takes a rebuilding of our infrastructure, keeping these communities in mind, and it's also not only just assuming what these communities need, it's building the relationships, it's asking them what they would like, and not necessarily making them have to work for it themselves, but working like the right people with the right resources are asking the right questions, just like Kim said, bringing all the right people to the table, even like UCF. With the downtown project, it's not necessarily a climate justice issue, but it has caused intense gentrification all throughout Paramore. It has really been detrimental to that community there, and I don't believe that UCF as a university is doing enough to repair the relationships with that community. They could very well be implementing jobs. They could be trying to implement renewable energy throughout all of downtown, so this way that could help that community a lot more. And it can also just be doing much more to reach out, because I also believe that sustainability is not only like environmental, but it's also social and economic. So as long as these communities aren't receiving the resources that they need, then it's not going to be sustainable beyond just the environmental aspect of it as well.
Lauren and I got stuck in a little fight on who unmutes, but So that was honestly, yeah, that's a really great point, that sustainability, it extends so much more beyond, our aspect of, environment, social justice intersects with climate justice so perfectly. And it's so important to highlight when we're talking about climate action. And so obviously in regards to renewable energy, one of the biggest and most influential ways that we can really target this is through policy, and it needs to be enforced. So starting off with Representative Ana Eskamani, what is your take on carbon taxes to encourage this independence that we need from fossil fuels?
Well, as we already talked about, it is one of the only ways to actually put a cost on the carbon footprint and to incentivize, in particular, corporations to seek new ways of producing their product without a carbon footprint. In the legislature, I have filed now 2 years in a row legislation to set a renewable energy goal for Florida to be 100% renewable energy based by 2050. And we plan to file that bill again because it's critically important that Florida paves the way of renewable energy, and we don't even have a goal in our state to get there. Multiple cities have their unique local goals, but UCF doesn't either. So I appreciate all the work Emma's doing, because it really does take every municipality, every university, every public building to make these commitments. But the state of Florida could be the one facilitating it and creating a work plan to actually get there. And this bill has not been given one hearing yet, and I have no doubt it's less grounded in partisanship and more grounded in the power of utility companies who don't want any type of goals. Utility companies don't want mandates. They continuously pour hundreds of thousands of dollars into politics to avoid any type of mandate or carbon tax. And I'll add too that this session, we did bring an amendment to the House floor for carbon neutrality by 2050. And at the very least, we were able to talk about it on the House floor. It did fail along a party line voice vote. But I think it's important as lawmakers that we not give up and we continuously bring up the points of renewable energy and carbon neutrality and talk about incentive programs like carbon tax to help motivate individuals, but also corporations to move away from the seductive use of fossil fuels and embrace what is the necessary change towards renewable energy.
That was a really great point. Thank you so much. And I actually have another question for you, Representative. So in regards to policies, how would you say an everyday citizen can help really push support of these policies to make sure they go through within House?
I love this question. So, what an aspect that I find to be very frustrating in the legislature is the influence of corporations. And I was very proud to take the Sunrise Movement's, fossil fuel free pledge back in 2017. That pledge was easy for me because I had already made a decision before I ran for office that I wasn't going to take money from fossil companies and big sugar companies and minimum wage employers and tourism industry, because candidly, many of these corporations, their business models are against my values, and whether it's values that are around protecting this planet or values around workers' rights, I just knew that there was always going to be a clash, and so I felt that it was more appropriate to raise money from the grassroots, to raise money from these corporations. Unfortunately, I am not the norm. And there are many Democrats who do take money from these companies. There are even more Republicans who do. And that sets the stage for policy. The number of moments where utility companies are sneaking in different bills that benefit them and their bottom line is staggering. And in particular, one of the issues of great concern for me in this past legislative session and future sessions has been protecting Fica. And for those who don't know, Fica is our Energy Efficiency Act that is renewed every 5 years by the Public Service Commission, PSC. PSC is a government basically around pay and what programs utility companies will implement. And I kid you not, this past year, the recommended goal by the staff of the PSC for energy efficiency programs, the numeric goal was 0, was zero. And I mean, it was basically saying that Florida should not have any energy efficiency goals for utility companies to match. And fortunately, due to the advocacy of groups here, groups like Environmental Florida and Florida Conservation Voters, everyday citizens flooded the PSC with letters. We spoke, myself and Senator Jose Javier Rodriguez spoke at their meeting, which was very unusual. Most lawmakers don't interact with the PSC. And we were able to get a delay of that decision, and the current goals, which are still pretty abysmal, but better than zero, have remained the same for now. And so I share that story because it highlights a few ways that everyday people can get involved. So one is to get to know your lawmakers and to make these election issues. We're not back in Tallahassee at this point until next year, and I have an election in between now and then. So this is the time to ask lawmakers if they're taking money from fossil fuel companies, why or why not, and to hold them accountable to that, right? And then if you have a lawmaker or a politician or a candidate who says we're not taking their money, then give them $10, give them $5, because the reality is that when I say no to fossil fuel companies, two things happen. One is I will not see their money, which is fine by me. But two, they will likely spend money against me. And so that means you have to support candidates, to survive through that, because there's a lot of money, just unlimited money that these companies have that will be used in elections. And if you really want your candidate to win, then you got to throw them a couple of bucks of grassroots support, volunteer with them, get friends to do the same. Volunteer to campaign is basically one of the best ways you can get involved and help on this work. And then finally, during Tallahassee, come to Tallahassee, right? I mean, I think that everyone here is already engaged at a very special level, whether it's university level, high school level, with local governments and Tallahassee, like Kim's doing. So think what speaks to your heart, right? Like have your mission in mind. But I definitely think if you're interested in state policy, then you got to come to Tallahassee, intern with lawmakers, write letters, make phone calls. Get co-sponsors on different bills. There's a lot of ways that you can be an advocate. And I know this issue can get really wonky and really dry, but if you're watching this on a Friday night, then you are a wonky person. And I definitely encourage you to, dive deeper into energy policy, because one reason why utility companies win the issue is that most lawmakers don't know the ins and outs of energy policy. And I do not come from an energy policy background whatsoever, but I have learned a lot this past year because I want to be a better advocate and better defender, if you will, of these issues.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that response. Kim, what's your opinion on using carbon taxes or helping push these policies through?
Yeah, so I just wanted to chime in a little bit as a follow-on to what Representative Eskamani said. We host an event every year called Reclaiming Florida's Future for All, where we bring people up from around the state. And one thing I tell our intern team that we have is that it's great for you to know who your representative is, but you also really want them to know who you are. And so that means developing that relationship, really having the conversations, being knowledgeable as you walk in, and then holding them accountable so that when they say Lorena Sosa is coming, all right, I better know what I'm talking about. Tell me all the renewable energy bills, those sorts of things, so that really you're developing that relationship. And part of it is absolutely just wearing my Rethink Energy Action hat, doing a little bit of that, volunteering, donating, even if it's $5, skip the coffee one week and donate to your candidates, because the ones that are truly looking out for people and what we care about are going to be probably not accepting funds from somebody, including fossil fuel companies, probably utility companies, those sorts of things. So I do think that's important too. And if you don't have the funds, finding the ability to volunteer. And then join groups like Rethink Energy Florida, other groups that are coming up that are bringing people up, because we do everything we can to make it accessible to everybody. If you're able to get on a bus, and if you're not able to get on a bus, we usually have an online action, we usually have an email action, we usually have a phone action that you can use to support what we're doing. And then just a word on carbon taxes. That is such a it is excellent because it is a market-driven approach, and Citizens Climate Lobby has done so much in terms of getting agreement from both sides of the aisle. I mean, they're truly awesome, and I understand that their lobby days are awesome as well. One thing I know that, and I don't know enough about it, but I know that one concern is around making sure that vulnerable communities get what they want. It sounds like from what Vasakan said, sorry if I screwed up your name there, but what he said, it sounds like that what you guys are working on is actually taking that into account, and that's great. But we do have to be careful that the money, that the bill doesn't get swayed in such a way that the money just goes back to the utility company, that the money just goes back to the companies that they don't need, and that it actually is helping the people as those bills move forward, because bills can change and become horrible bills by the time they get to a vote. So that's something to pay attention to as you're going. But it does actually pull from both sides of the aisle, and I truly commend CCL on that because they're a lot further along than a lot of other groups are.
Can I add to that? Thank you, Kim, for the kind words. I might be a little biased, but I would encourage everyone to join CCL or any other climate group. I think joining climate groups is the best way to go. When I first got started, yesterday was my 3-year anniversary actually with Citizens Climate Lobby. I was a freshman in high school. I didn't know much, but because of Citizens Climate Lobby, I was able to get educated and I was able to network. So I talked to a lot of county commissioners and even Congressman Ted Deutsch, and he actually introduced our bill last year. When you join a network, you get better connections, and when I email offices, they email back. And like Kim and Anna were saying, it's very important to have that relationship with your elected officials, because remember that elected officials do work for us. So it's important to maintain contact with them. Actually, just yesterday, I was on a Zoom call with Ted Deutsch, and we were discussing the future of HR 763. So even me as a high school student, I was able to do so much just by getting with like-minded people. And that kind of shows the power of group advocacy. So join either CCL or whatever groups are near you. Thank you.
And I just want to give a shout out to Ideas for Us, because when I was a UCF student back in the day, Ideas was a fairly new organization and one of the most impactful and influential, and continues to this day. And so, I was the campus organizer with College Democrats and different organizations that kind of intersected on different issues with Ideas. And so, I'm super impressed by this upcoming generation, because the fact that you're so involved in high school and that, Emma, you're doing this work at UCF, and it just it continues to fill me up with hope that the next generation of lawmakers are going to really understand this issue well, and there won't even be any doubt about, what action should we take.
Thank you so much. Yes. Emma, what is your stance on carbon taxes or helping push through policies, especially at a university level?
For an individual university student, it's often challenging because the two things that often get legislation like a carbon tax passed is time and money. And then it's often something that a university student doesn't usually have. It usually takes dedicating your entire degree, your college career, as I'm doing, to try to push through these. But I do want to say, I've recently been aware of just high school students becoming more involved in this and continuing through. I was just listening to a podcast the other day about the history of This Is Zero Hour, and all the students there is just so amazing. I had no idea when I was in high school, and that was only 3 years ago, that organizations like this were happening. And I really feel like it's coming up through at a younger age, and more students will be able to come to campus and engage and start groups like Ideas. And I even at UCF throughout my 2 years, I've seen so many more new registered student organizations come. The Defender of Future is a brand new one that's an offspring of the national branch. as well as the Environmental Defense Fund. And it's just all of the political organizing is just, it's so powerful because at a grassroots level, because if you're not the one at the top, like Representative Eskamani, like you have to be the one supporting them. And just all of the opportunities that all of these grassroots campaigns are providing for just university students, for high school students, which is really, really amazing to me. Even our climate, I had the opportunity to go to a lobbying day and lobby for how the Corona funds should be used and shouldn't go to corporations and should be going to like rebuild our energy system after this pandemic is over. And I was able to do that just as a junior in high school. Junior in college, how old I was. And I was able to talk to these lawmakers, and so many of them were on board. And at UCF, we also do Day at the Capitol, where we go and lobby. And last year, I was able to lobby for the Energy Task Force. I was able to talk to so many different representatives and trying to get them on board with that. And just creating these opportunities and getting students involved, making it easy and entry level. It's not something like daunting. That yes, phone banking in the beginning, many people don't even know what it is, but once you explain it, it's just simply making calls. You're talking to people. It's just simple interactions that will often change people's minds and educate them. And it's very, very important that these grassroots organization keeps this going. And I love the momentum that I feel like is being picked up. Maybe it's just in the echo chamber of Orlando that I'm noticing this, but I really feel like this is definitely a national thing, and I'm very inspired by it.
Thank you, everybody, for your amazing inputs. Yes, it fills me with hope, too, even though I'm like 17 years old and I'm part of this generation. There's a bright future ahead of us. So looking at the future and the needed changes that we are pushing towards, focusing on our current situation, how do you see our Hello? Oh, am I connected? Sorry, did I just like phase out? Okay, sorry about that. Anyways, back to my question. How do you guys see our current energy systems affecting us locally, such as socially, economically, health risks, anything in that umbrella? Representative Eskamani, would you like to start us?
Sure, I can. I think most folks are very surprised to hear that OUC has a coal power plant, off Alafaya near Avalon Park. And I grew up in East Orlando. I lived in Avalon Park for a few years, and have connected with many residents that have been concerned about the externalities of that coal power plant to the surrounding communities. And there's been ongoing research and even litigation around that issue when it comes to the Staten power plant. And I want to see that power plant close, and I don't want to see any. I think we should be moving past the point of building new coal, gas power plants. Like, that is the past. And I really do think that it's the antithesis of everything Orlando wants to do, right? I mean, Orlando prides itself on having renewable energy goals, on incredible sustainability programming, on different layers of that programming, and yet we have a coal power plant that's the main source of energy. It doesn't make sense, and so we really need to transition away from coal and away from natural gas. And so I do think that's concerning that we still have this power plant that OUC is directly attached to. And so we need to move away from that.
Yes, thank you. It is a definite concern that needs to be addressed. Kim, how do you see our current energy systems affecting us locally?
So, and apart from what Representative Eskamani just said, I'm not as familiar with Orlando, but I can speak to Tallahassee and some other areas as well. But I think it's very similar. As utilities start to move away from fossil fuels, they need to truly move away. And I know in Tallahassee, there over the past decade or so, there's been an attempt to put, maybe a little longer than a decade, but there was an attempt to build a coal-fired power plant, and then there was an attempt to build biofuel plant that had that was a lower quality, that had a lot of health issues surrounding that. And both of those were, one of them, the biofuel one, was on the south side of town. The other one was in a poor area that was maybe, an hour and a half away from Tallahassee. So, let's get it outside and not in my backyard. And so, those are things, as you start to think about the transitioning to renewable energy, you still got to think about things like, are you going to chop down trees or can you put it up on buildings, and making sure that you're, if you're talking about solar, obviously, making sure that you're thinking about those things and bringing the right people to the table up front. Again, it all comes down to that as you start to plan for a clean energy future. You got to think about other things that are a little outside of renewable energy, like transportation, and the legislature, unfortunately, funded and last year passed the tollways to nowhere bills that, are just going to add more cars to our road instead of thinking about how can we transport people safely using newer forms of transportation. So those are all things that, I think they do affect people locally. And we've got to kind of, I think, bringing the right people, the local people to the table as we're making decisions. And frankly, I really appreciate Representative Eskamani because she's always reaching out and, on calls like this, she's reaching out to people to find out their opinions. She's conversing, she's available. She's one of the most available representatives out there, and and more representatives and senators for the state of Florida and the U.S. Congress ought to do that type of listening that she does on a regular basis.
Yes, I agree with everything that you said. So Basakin, I know you live near Boca. So what is your view on how current energy systems affect us and your community locally as well?
Thank you. So luckily, we don't live near any major plants or anything. So living in Boca, we're lucky in that sense that we're not near any major pollution. But Boca is a large tourist site, and we have beaches. And I think climate change is not a local threat. One of the most urgent things about climate change is that it is a national threat. And all of us as Floridians, we have a strong tourist economy, and climate change threatens that through sea level rise. We're already seeing another aspect of not necessarily climate change, but environmental destruction with the red tide and the blue-green algae bloom, which is destroying the fishing industry and the tourist industry in the Everglades. So that's kind of an example of what happens when you're not careful with your environmental policy. That's kind of a foreshadow of what's going to happen if we don't control climate change. Already, like I said, in Miami, we're seeing precautions being taken. We're seeing roads being pushed up in Miami to prevent the disasters of climate change. But instead of adapting to climate change, we need to be proactive and take the measures we need.
Yes, thank you very much. I agree with that, and that the needed changes are to be made. Emma, living in Orlando as well, how do you see our current energy systems affecting us locally?
I think ultimately it has a lot to do of being privileged of a university student in our little UCF bubble. We don't see the power plant over in Avalon Park. Most students wouldn't know that even existed if it wasn't for different educational events that we have on campus. We do have the privilege of kind of being unaware to all of it happening. Just recently, I was totally unaware of how Big Sugar burns their vegetative waste, causing all the air pollution. I'm continuously, as a student, becoming more aware of all the different environmental injustices throughout my coursework, and that ultimately, it's not tangible to a lot of students, even if you are taking these classes. And I feel like it's very easy to ignore these issues if you're not passionate about them, and I think that's a very big issue because often low-income students aren't able to afford high cost universities. They're not able to get these degrees or learn about it. They are experiencing it firsthand, but they're not given resources to solve it. And then the people that are given the resources not necessarily are exposed to it. So it's kind of like this divide that causes people in power to ignore it. And that is why, like the grassroots, as I was saying earlier, is so important, because it gets the right people involved and it brings the right people to the table. And I think that's very important in trying to bring awareness to these issues and try to promote renewable energy throughout our community.
Thank you so much, Emma. It is really important that we consider how, these vulnerable communities are affected by the outcomes of our current energy systems. And my next question is for Representative Eskamani. And so we obviously have to be optimistic about the current situation we're in. So how do you see renewable energy working out for us in the future, like in the next 5 years?
Oh man, I am super optimistic. I just want to say thank you too, because I do have a 7:00 radio show I have to hop on. So I'm going to hop off after this. But thank you to both of you for hosting, and to my fellow panelists. This has been an awesome conversation. I have a lot of hope for the future. I mean, I think that there's no question about it that renewable energy is the future. Public transportation is the future. Electronic cars are the future. I have so many Republican friends that drive Teslas. And, part of me thinks it's like because it feels like a luxury item, but it also saves them money, right? So I think we have to be really smart about what are the facts that inspire different groups of people to care about the same issue. And to that point, when I think about the future of renewable energy, I'm also thinking about like new ways we can capture it. And so floating solar is being piloting in different parts of the country. And there's even floating windmills that just like blows my mind, that there would be windmills floating like in the ocean, huge windmills. And so I'm very hopeful that, not only will we continue to develop better battery storage and better ways to capture energy, but as Kim mentioned too, to be thoughtful about even the externalities with renewable energy, right? Because there's always some sort of waste that is produced. And so how do we make sure that we always mitigate the waste that is being released in any type of renewable energy? The potential damage towards the environment when we do build solar farms or windmills, right? To always try to find ways to prevent any type of unnecessary damage to our ecosystem. And of course, doing all of this while creating leadership opportunities for directly impacted people, because I echo the points made of environmental justice. We cannot make assumptions about what communities need. We have to show up, amplify the voices of those directly impacted, listen and learn, and find leadership opportunities where folks can actually get paid for doing this work, right? And find a full career in environmental policy or building renewable energy and so forth. So I'm super hopeful, and I thank all of you again, and can't wait to continue the conversation.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Take care. So our next question is for Kim. What do you see, especially with Rethink Energy? What kind of influence do you hope to see in the future?
I agree with Representative Eskamani, that the future is hopeful. The market is already there, right? Like it's already, especially with the drop in oil and gas prices that have happened during COVID-19. That's a chance as we start to rebuild our economy, which even though some people think is happening now, I think will probably happen after we get a vaccine in a major way, because I think we're going to keep seeing issues, but that's another topic for another day. But whenever we start to rebuild our economy, we could rebuild it green. We can take, we can ask fossil fuel companies to make a commitment to go toward renewable energy. Like they don't even have to be out of a business. They could shift what they're doing. They don't have to, it's up to them, but they would have to shift being away and get out of the fossil fuel industry and into the renewable energy business. And the market is already primed for that. And, carbon taxes, those sorts of things are other additional things that can help prime that. So then the other thing that comes to my mind is this moment that we're in right now, right? Where with the Black Lives Matter movement, we've seen such change so quickly, right? And we've seen people suddenly realize, oh, right, this is like something that we need to do, and we need to have done it yesterday, right? Climate change, environmental justice, climate justice are very connected to racial justice. And I think that what we've seen longer term, slightly longer term, is our youth movement. You all, thank you. I think I was always the oldest person, but I'm now by far the oldest person on the call. So thank you all, because you all inspire people like me, and you inspire us, and you get out there, right? And you are doing that. You've been doing that. And I think you have that same ability to inspire and to create movement. And we've seen that, over the last couple of years. And I think that there's a chance, as we start to come together in this time of many crises, that gives us the opportunity to say, well, how can we do this different and better? And I think part of how we can do this different and better is having the right people at the table, but figuring out how are we moving forward instead of going backwards. Most people on either side of the aisle that I'm connected with, I hear them saying, why we don't want to go backwards. There's no, let's get things back to normal. There's no normal. So let's move forward, and let's figure out what moving forward looks like from a climate perspective, as we move into renewable energy. And so, yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much. And so Vasakin, especially through your work with carbon taxes, how do you hope to see that continue to shape the future of renewable energy?
Yeah. So I just wanted to add a little bit on what Kim was saying earlier. We shouldn't try to go back to normal. We shouldn't have had to reduce our emissions due to a pandemic. The pandemic is very sad, and that shouldn't be our expectation, that we're reducing it for a pandemic. We should always be trying to keep our emissions down. And in the future, I think a carbon tax is the most effective way to create demand for renewable energy, because like we keep saying, the price of fossil fuels do not reflect the actual cost. Fossil fuels are cheap, but in the long run, it causes damage to health, it causes damage to property, and it's not feasible forever. Whereas something like solar and wind power would be a little bit more expensive, but it's feasible for the long run and doesn't have the repercussions of fossil fuels. So I think a carbon tax would more fairly show that price to make sure that in the free market, we actually make the correct choices reflecting long-term output. This is not just what many say liberal propaganda or leftist propaganda. If you read any microeconomics textbook, even by conservative authors, they acknowledge the existence of what are known as negative externalities. And negative externality is when you get something bad from when you don't expect it. So like an unintended consequence. And the way to reduce something is to tax it. That's economics 101. So if we want to reduce the repercussions of fossil fuels, a carbon tax is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Vasakin. And Emma, what do you see as the future for renewable energy?
Definitely at the university level, I was reading that more and more students are starting to look at where they go to university as how sustainable it is. It's no longer like athletics, it's no longer academics. They are looking that these schools are progressing, and I think they'll go across the board for all institutions. And at UCF, I'm hoping that the future is, as I mentioned earlier, like the Green Energy Fund, the Green Revolving Fund, putting the money back into the school. And then more and more universities are starting to adapt all of these similar initiatives. It's kind of the ASHE is the American Association of Sustainability and Higher Education, and they have done a really amazing job of kind of unifying all these schools and universities to do these similar projects, so we can try to push renewable energy and sustainability throughout all of them, because higher education institutions are a great way to get all of this started, because this is the people that are going to be entering the workforce, and they are making an impact on dozens or thousands of students yearly. So I definitely see like a push in more university students becoming interested in this, entering this field of sustainability. I think it's very developing, and then we'll see more and more graduates entering renewable energy industry, trying to get solar energy in Florida and wind energy across the globe, everywhere. And I think it will definitely be this generation. I have a lot of hope for in bringing more renewable energy.
Thank you, everybody, for your answers. I do agree that it is not just like one pathway. There are multiple pathways, and the future kind of literally rests on our shoulders, like this generation's shoulders, to make it, to basically save the world, not to make it a big deal or anything. But moving on, we have another question from our Facebook Live from Paula Davis. And she says that we should be the leader in wind, solar, and water systems that capture energy. We have geology and major corporations like Siemens we could work with. So why aren't we basically the leader in wind, solar, and water systems? What's holding us back, and what can we do to overcome those obstacles to be the leader that we should be in this renewable energy field?
Can I take that?
Yes, please.
Right. So like I was saying, right now it's cheaper for companies to innovate with oil. They want to do things like fracking or offshore drilling because oil is the cheapest for them right now. And as businesses, they're going to do what they can to keep their costs as low as possible. And they often cite things like, say, China or Russia, saying that they're going to have cheaper energy if we have a carbon tax. But what they fail to realize is that when you factor in the true cost of fossil fuels through a carbon fee, people will be more incentivized to go to renewable energy. And that always creates a sort of revolution. Like, in America, we're very innovative. From Silicon Valley, in Texas, in New York, we have major centers of innovation that are always willing to do research. But right now, the demand for research isn't there. If we had a carbon fee, companies would try to save money by innovating newer ways of creating energy through renewable energy. So I think if we implement a carbon fee, it would truly increase the demand for research and development in the renewable sector.
Thank you very much. Kim, what do you think that we should do to be the leader in nationwide and also statewide in this renewable energy movement?
Yeah, so there's a few things, and there's a few reasons why we're not. And it all comes down to the old paradigm, essentially. First, the United States spends about $20.5 billion annually on subsidies of the fossil fuel companies. Right, that's a lot of money. We do not need to be subsidizing fossil fuel companies any longer. We could be spending that money on research and development. We could be doing a lot of other things, and that's just like straight up money. Like we're not talking about the externalities that we've been talking about all night, right? But like those are subsidies from the United States government to our fossil fuel companies. So that needs to end. And I do think we need a paradigm shift of people in their thinking, right? But we also really need to shift the paradigm at the policy level, right? So all of our policies in the state of Florida, for instance, we have monopolies actually written into our statutes. So every utility is a monopoly, and they have to go. They basically don't have to compete with each other for selling you energy, and so that gives them so much power. And some of the, they're starting because of the market forces to come around to renewable energy, but they don't want to give up their monopolies. And so, that takes the power out of the hands of the people. And so I think that there's got to be a paradigm shift in terms of people having power, and also in terms of where we get our energy power from, and as we move forward. And it's a mental shift first. We've already got the market's already there. Yes, there's additional research and development that needs to be done, but the market's already ready for it. So it's really just about social and political will. And so the more that the people that are watching this or that are going to watch it later, more everybody sees that and starts to take action and starts to talk to candidates that are running for office and educate them about what they want to see, starts to talk to their elected leaders. All of that, the more that comes together, the more, the more we'll have that paradigm shift. But we've got to start, and we've got to start now. And we've got to start with people power.
Thank you very much. Yes, it is a whole 180 into that direction. Emma, why do you think we are not the leader in the renewable energy movement, and what can we do to overcome it?
One thing in Florida that really blows my mind, and it is because of the energy monopolies, is that third-party power agreements is illegal in the state of Florida. So basically, residential housing is not able to create energy and sell it off to other, if they are producing more solar energy than they are using, they're not able to sell it to their neighbors. They're not able to sell it off for their own profit. And also, if a company wants to go ahead and implement solar panels onto a business or home and for little to no cost up front, and then provide energy for them, that is considered illegal because the oil companies, OUC in Orlando, most prominently, they want to keep it going, that they are the ones in power. They don't want solar energy taking over because then they are going to make less of a profit. And in the Sunshine State, that's just really disheartening because there could be so much, right now, I believe that only 2% of Florida's energy was solar energy in the last year. Don't quote me on that, it could be wrong, but it's very, very small amount compared to what the capacity that could be happening. And I think just simple legislations like that. And unfortunately, it has been tried again to overturn the third-party power agreement statute. And hopefully in the future, we'll see that there will ultimately be a policy change and we will try to divert the power from the corporation to the people, as Kim said.
Thank you so much. That was really great. Honestly, it's very important that we are giving power to the people, especially with renewable energy, making sure these voices that are impacted are heard. And so we actually have one last question from the audience. What local government policies and programs do you all wish to see implemented and expanded in cities across the US? And we can start off with Vasakin.
Thank you. I think the best way to address the climate crisis is through federal legislation, actually. Because say we start polluting less where I live in Boca, but somewhere else they start polluting more, we're all going to face the repercussions together. We're all in this together, so we have to have comprehensive action. One of the strategies used by Citizens Climate Lobby still involves local levels. So one thing that our chapter has done is that we've gotten resolutions passed in the Palm Beach County Board of Commissioners and the Boca Raton Mayor's Office. We've got some past resolutions endorsing federal action on climate change, and sometimes even specifically endorsing carbon taxes. So since this climate movement is a grassroots movement, if we empower people all over the country to reach out to their local governments to pass endorsements, we start at the local level, work up to the state level, eventually they'll get to the national level. So I encourage everyone to join their local climate advocacy group, could be CCL, but I encourage you guys to get out, start small and get big, and we can make a difference.
Thank you for that really inspiring note, Vasakin. It is possible to definitely make a difference when we take these sorts of collective actions. And so, Kim Ross, what policies would you like to see be taken on?
So we do act at the local level a lot. Sometimes it's easier to get things done I agree with Vasakin that until there's something that happens at the federal and international level, there's going to be pollution. But right now, cities and counties are leading. So I think the number one thing we can do is one, work with our city and county governments to get to 100% renewable energy at the local level. And then two, I think you can go to, I think that the other thing that you can do is to work with your city utility or the utility in your area. It's not always, obviously a lot of it is Florida Power and Light and Duke Energy, but actually work with them to try and get them to bring the right people to the table to make sure that they're heading toward renewable energy, to push them to head toward renewable energy, to push your state officials to not take money from fossil fuels, but also not take money from utilities in order to be able to better regulate our utilities and lift some of the things that Emma was talking about with the monopolies and the third party providers solar, so that if I have solar and I can sell it to you cheaper than the utility, I should be allowed to do that. So those are some things, and those can happen. That particular thing can only happen at the state level, but locally, you can pass resolutions too. If you've got something that can only happen at the state or the federal level, like Vasakin was saying, you can get your local officials to pass resolutions. A lot of times they know the people that are making the decisions at the state and the federal level, and they can call their cell phone and say, hey, this is an issue. I'm hearing it from my constituents, and they're your constituents too. So that's one way to get through to some of those bigger issues that are at the state and national level. Right now, cities are leading, and that's okay too. They can keep leading and keep making a change.
Thank you, Kim. And finally, Emma, what's your take on how we can tackle and push more policies? What would you like to see, especially?
Especially the third power party agreement is definitely something just in the state of Florida. But as Kim was saying, just the power that cities has is immense, because that is where the majority of people and energy users do live. So I do believe that cities could definitely take charge. Like locally, I know that Lynx, the bus system, is trying to change to all electric buses, which I think is amazing. And I think transportation is one of the largest polluting industries. So I definitely think that it would be ideal. And then just generally, I think despite recent events, a lot of legislation has been going pro-environmentally. The Great Outdoors Act just got passed. A lot of pipelines seem to have been turned down. So I'd love to see that trend continue. I would ultimately love for the coal plant in Orlando to get torn down, or not torn down, to be dismantled. And I'd just love to see in the future that there is no more pipelines, there is no more coal plants. We are ridding of the basically obsolete energy, and we're continuously working towards the new renewable energy.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for your input. It looks like that's all the questions we have for today. Thank you so much a million times over. This was so eye-opening and inspiring, and I just learned so much in like this hour and a half. So thank you again to Representative Anna, Kim, Vasakin, and Emma. So thank you so much again. I hope you all have a lovely day, and especially towards our audience and Ernest as well for helping us a million times over. Thank you. This was such a pleasure. I hope you all have a wonderful day and stay safe and sanitized. Thank you.
Thank you so much.